the meeting open, and can I welcome each and every one of you. Thank you very much for your commitment to this community. And I think we realise that the role we play in this amazing organisation, in this amazing area, is an important role, and we'll achieve an awful lot by working as well as we can together. This meeting today will be live streamed and it's open to the public. And can I welcome those who are watching this meeting live stream? Can I welcome our staff who are in the room? And I would like to thank those who are in the room and acknowledge very much the importance of the role they play. In opening the meeting today, I would like to acknowledge the Aboriginal parties whose songlines traverse these lands we meet on today. The Western Waka Waka, the Gaybil, the Jarrawa, and in the western part of our region, the Bigginbal people. I pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging, for they hold the knowledge, the rich traditions and the bold ambitions of Australia's first people. Obviously, councillors, there are no apologies at this point in time. Is there anybody who wishes to seek leave of absence at some time in the future? Councillor O'Hara-Sullivan.
Oh, Kirsten, did you have the dates that I sent through?
I'm sorry, I haven't got any record of anything here.
Did you have them, Kirsten?
Are you using your microphone? I'm having
Sorry, yeah, I'd sent them through to Kirsten. I'm just not sure exactly of the dates. It will be, since the ordinary meeting's being changed next month. Kirsten, did you have them? I'd sent them through. What was that? Oh, sorry.
So you wish to seek leave of absence, Councillor O'Hara-Sullivan?
I do, Mr Mayor. I just got to find them. I thought I was all sorted, but obviously not.
So Brian has showed me an email here that you'll be heading for Ireland the 24th.
I just wish to seek, yes, thank you.
I just thought I'd throw a bit of detail in, Councillor.
No, thank you.
Have I done something wrong, Councillor Somerville?
No, sorry, I just
Thanks
can't
for your advice.
find it. Hang on, sorry. Can we come back to me?
Well,
Will
is
I
there anyone
find
else wishing to take leave of absence at that period?
Oh, God.
It's here. Brian Pidgeon has showed me that. The CEO has showed me that.
But then there's the committee meetings.
12th and 13th of July.
Yeah. Thank you.
But you'd be granted
And any
leave
special,
of absence.
yes, and any special meetings that may be.
Any special meetings that
between,
occur
yeah.
from the 24th, when
Yes.
I inadvertently said you were leaving for Ireland, until you return post that date.
Thank you, yes.
You've got a return date?
Oh, God, sorry.
Maybe it'd be appropriate to have that in there.
It's the 14th. Sorry. Now, I'm all flustered now. It's the 14th of July.
14th of July from the 24th of June.
Thank you.
It's important that we have those two dates in there to indicate clearly when you will be unavailable. Someone like to move accordingly that Councillor O'Hara-Sullivan be granted leave of absence, Councillor Carol Taylor, Councillor Von Hoff. Those in favour? That's carried. Anyone else wishing?
No, June is the... Is that right?
Does it include the ordinary meeting on the 23rd? You're leaving on the 24th, is my understanding?
No. I need to have leave of absence for the Thursday now that the meeting's been changed to the 23rd. So from the 23rd to the 14th.
from the 23rd of June to the 14th of July.
Yes.
So the mover and seconder are comfortable with the changes that had to be made there?
I'm sorry, my apologies. Yes, Mr Mayor, as long as we've got the right dates for Councillor O'Sullivan, the appropriate dates. Thank you.
Thank you. Comfortable with that, Councillor O'Sullivan?
Yes,
We had a
thank you.
mover.
Sorry, Mr Mayor.
We have a seconder. I'll take the vote. Those in favour? It's carried. Anyone else seeking leave of absence? Councillor Shine?
Not too sure whether I need to, but I'll be absent on that morning of the 23rd, not realising it was going to be an ordinary meeting date, for probably only about half an hour for an appointment that I need to keep. So whether, because of that short period of time, I have to seek leave of absence or not, I'm not too sure, but out of an abundance of caution, perhaps I should.
I will seek the advice of the CEO. Would Councillor Shine require leave of absence to be away for half an hour? I'd be doubtful.
You could just say relief of absence for the commencement of the meeting or something along those lines, but intends to be available later on in the same meeting.
Yeah, well,
And then
To that
if it
effect.
changes, we can record it in the
Okay.
minutes.
thank you.
So we've got no need at this point in time to have a motion? Is what I'm picking up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone understand the advice that I've just received? That for being away half an hour on that particular morning would be a matter of another process. Anyone else wishing to seek leave of absence? If not, we'll move on to declaration of interests. And Councillor Von Hoff, do you have something you wish to declare?
I do, thank you, Mayor. I've got your microphone now. I've got the pleasure of using a similar microphone. Mayor, I'd like to declare an interest in relation to item number 6.1, your mayoral minute regarding the Gowrie Oakey Creek Irrigators Association. I inform this meeting that I have a declarable conflict of interest in this matter as defined in section 150 EN of the Local Government Act 2009. The nature of my interest is as follows. This declarable conflict of interest arises because a person who is a related party of mine has an interest in this matter, the particulars. The name of the related party, Mr Ben Johns. The nature of my relationship with the related party is that Mr Ben Johns is a personal friend. The nature of the related party's interest in this matter is that Mr Ben Johns is a member of the Gowrie Oakey Creek Irrigators Association. I wish to participate in the decision in relation to this matter. I acknowledge that eligible councillors must now determine, pursuant to section 150 ES of the Local Government Act 2009, whether I, 1, may participate in the decision about the matter, including by voting on the matter, 2, must leave the meeting, including any area set aside for the public, and stay away from the meeting while the eligible councillors discuss and vote on the matter, or 3, may participate in the decision about the matter subject to conditions.
Thanks very much, Councillor Von Hoff. Are there any comments around the room? I have a personal view that Councillor Von Hoff has nothing to win or nothing to lose out of a matter of this nature. Councillor Summerfield.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Von Hoff, I read up on this the other day out of interest, and an example that was used was if you were a member of a wedding party at a wedding, you would be considered having a conflict of interest. You wouldn't consider yourself that close, would you?
No.
Thank you.
Any comments around the room? Not. Councillor McDonald.
Yeah, Mayor, I endorse the comments of Councillor Summerfield, so much so that, in fact, Ben Johns' family are a neighbour of mine. But again, I wouldn't see that as any conflict whatsoever in regard to what we're dealing with that item. If something crops up during the discussion of that item that is more specific to a particular property, then that may be deemed as some level of conflict, but it'd be a long stretch because this is talking about the the Murray-Darling, the whole catchment area, and being specific to one particular property would not be, would be the only opportunity I would see that there could be any link whatsoever. But that's why I didn't choose even to have this declaration, to be fair.
Thank you. We need a decision out of council, and quite frankly, I'm comfortable to take a motion that Councillor Von Hoff is not in any way impacted by being part of that discussion. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm comfortable to move on such a motion because with the very reasons that have been stated, that the relationship mentioned gives Councillor Von Hoff no more to gain or lose than anybody else in this, as it's a more strategic matter that you have brought to the table today as a mayoral minute, and I don't believe that there's any personal gain or loss in it for Councillor Von Hoff. Thank you.
So I'm accepting that Councillor Taylor is moving a motion. Is there a seconder around the table? Councillor Melissa Taylor. Any discussion? Those in favour? That's carried. Any other declarable interests that anyone wishes to bring forward at this point in time? If not, we'll move to the confirmation of the minutes. Item 3. Firstly, item 3.1, the ordinary meeting of the 19th of April 2022, at which all councillors were present. Anyone wishing to move that they be a true and proper record? Councillor O'Shea has moved. Seconder, please. Councillor McDonald. Those in favour? That is carried. Move then to item 3.2, the special meeting on the 4th of May 2022. Councillor Melissa Taylor was absent from that meeting. Would someone like to move that the minutes of that special meeting held on the 4th of May are true and proper record? Councillor Megan O'Hara-Sullivan has moved. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Shine. Any questions? Those in favour? Motion is carried. Presentation of positions, presentation of petitions. Is there any business arising out of the minutes of the previous meetings that have been brought forward today? No business arising? That's the case. We move to item 5, the presentations of petitions. Now, Councillor Carol Taylor, item 5.1, a petition will be tabled by Councillor Taylor in respect to speed reduction in Curzon Street, Mount Lofty. Councillor Carroll. Okay. Councillor Melissa, would you like to present that? I'm sorry, I have before me Councillor Carroll.
My apologies, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Melissa.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The petition to be presented today of Joseph Damon Carroll draws to the attention of Council the safety issues related to drivers travelling at excessive speeds in both directions on Curzon Street between Wooldridge and Jellicoe Streets. The petition is requesting Council put in place various measures to ensure drivers adhere to the regulated 50 km/h speed limit. The petitioners have suggested various methods to ensure this limit is adhered to for the safety of all road users and pedestrians, particularly the neighbourhood children. This petition comes forward today after a meeting Councillor Kerry Shine, Councillor Rebecca Von Hoff and I had with a number of affected residents, and I present that today.
Okay, if you could bring that petition down, and you're obviously moving the receipt of that petition. Do I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Shine. Any comments from anybody? You've simply moved the receipt of that petition, and that will be sent. Councillor Shine, you wish to comment?
Yeah, no, in support of what Councillor Taylor has said, the Councillor Von Hoff and Councillor Taylor and myself did attend a meeting with quite a number of residents of that area a month or so ago, and they pointed out the dangers that were present, as indicated in the petition and in the supporting remarks of Councillor Taylor. Councillors will note that many prominent Toowoomba identities are listed in the petition, persons whose views should be respected, and I hope Council will take notice in a practical way about the concerns raised. Thank you.
I just remind councillors, Mr Mayor, if I may, that the default speed is 50 k's unless otherwise signed.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Well, I'll put this one to the vote. That petition has been moved by Councillor Melissa, seconded by Councillor Shine, that petition be received. Those in favour? It's carried. Over to you, Councillor Carroll.
Mr Mayor, I have two petitions. I have a petition in the name of Mr Alan Stanton of 22... I'm sorry, there's a bit of feedback here. Of 22 Whyalla Street, Newtown, and it's regarding the speed limit in Whyalla Street, Newtown. Drawing the attention of council to the speed limit on Whyalla Street and reasons why the residents and workers believe it should be reduced to 50 kilometres an hour. We therefore ask council to decrease the speed limit, considering the volume of traffic on that road at all times of the day. It is actually a rat run between Whyalla Plaza and Hursley Road. It's a large residential area including school children, as well as work area and parking for the Toowoomba Turf Club stakeholders, that is, trainers, stable hands, jockeys, etc. The combination of large trucks and horses being moved, together with school traffic and fast traffic in this area, is dangerous. I point out that the speed limit at the moment on this street is 60 k's an hour. We, the residents and workers, request council review the speed limit on Whyalla Street with a view to reducing the speed limit to 50 k's an hour. I move that this petition be received. I actually support the petition, but it will go through the process.
It's been moved by Councillor Carroll Taylor that that petition be received. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Melissa Taylor. Any comments? Those in favour of the receipt of that petition, could you bring that down, please, Councillor Carroll?
I will.
Yeah, bring the other one down as well.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Go to item 5.2, which is in relation to flooding issues in Henry Street, Cranley.
Thank you. I present a petition from the residents of Henry Street, Cranley, and they're asking for flooding and drainage issues to be addressed. They believe that water is being redirected, i.e. a worsening, from a subdivision above them. The petition is in the name of R&D Gann of 9 Hendy Street, and they have upwards of 60 signatures on that petition. Thank you, Mr Mayor. I believe it sits in development engineering, but we will see. It goes through the process.
So, Councillor Carroll, you've moved that. Do I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Von Hoff. Any comments at all? Those in favour of the receipt of that petition? Thank you very much, Councillor Carroll. If you could just... Thank you very much. So that concludes the area of petitions. We move now to item 6, which is a matter that I had been approached by the Oakey Creek irrigators in respect to a funding opportunity that's available through the federal government off-farm efficiency grants, where the Oakey Creek irrigators would like to negotiate with council, would certainly like us to apply for some funding so that the water that we put into, some of the water, a given amount of the water that we would put into Oakey Creek would be funded by that grant. Their idea, of course, is to benefit that creek, to keep the water in the creek rather than have the creek go dry in dry times. So the ultimate benefit is to the broader creek, Gary Creek, Oakey Creek, and of course that across the whole Murray-Darling Basin would have quite a profound effect. So you have the information there. I'm very comfortable to move that motion. Councillor Carroll?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm happy to second it, bearing in mind the water we put in there is from another catchment, but I certainly agree with
Exactly.
the sentiment. Thank you, Mr
I think
Mayor.
we've...
Happy to second it.
Councillor Carroll has seconded that. Anyone wishing to go into debate in respect to that? This is about bringing an information session to council, and I think asking our people to get on and put that application in for that funding. So it's not going to be a lot of water. They don't want a whole lot of water. It's not as if it's thousands of megalitres. It's simply a matter of us being paid, which we're not now, being paid for some of the water that would go into Oakey Creek. Damien, did you wish to make any comments in respect to it? General Manager Damien?
Mr Mayor,
Mr Mayor, I've got an information session booked for tomorrow morning, so we can discuss it there, sir.
Thank you very much. Look, I think I can't see where we can lose in respect to this. I can see where we can gain and the Oakey irrigators can gain. Councillor Carl, you were wanting to make a comment? Oh, Councillor Summerfield.
Thank you, Chair. I was just making sure that this is simply enabling an information session rather than an action.
The problem we have, of course, is that the applications for any funding have to be in by the 27th of May.
So we need to understand that what we're voting on here today is purely for an information session, not that we're committing to something.
Exactly. That's precisely what it is.
Thank you. So if we need to make a decision on that, we would have to have a special meeting.
Well, we would have to have some mechanism of making sure that we could formalise it.
That's right, because we can't make a decision in an information session, so we'd have to have a special meeting, and I note the CEO's nodding. Thank you.
Councillor Carl.
Yeah, that was in fact my same question, that I wanted to be clear that we're actually agreeing to an information session and not an action. And indeed, there is an opportunity with special meetings prior to that date where we could bring it forward.
Yeah. Well, if you read the resolution there, you'll find that that an information session on the following be provided, the first number of words. So. And I think if we see it as a worthwhile cause, I'd imagine that we would have to make sure that we can do something about formalising that. And that was the process that I had in mind when I brought this here as a result of discussions that I've had with Ben Johns and the irrigators. Anybody wishing to make a comment? Councillor McDonald.
Just thanks, Mr Mayor. It might be useful for us at the information session through you, Mayor, to Damien, to find out around the possibility of there being another round of these. I understand these are under applied for as they currently are, so the deadline might beat some people. It'd be useful just to get some idea from the author of the grants before tomorrow morning, if it's possible, Damien, just to get some understanding on that. Thanks.
I think that's fair. I think it's important that we have an understanding of what this is all about. The Oakey irrigators, of course, would benefit from the fact that the creek was formerly quite wet when rain came, and that would certainly benefit them, but it would benefit the whole Murray-Darling system if there was a lot of this happening right across the broader system. So let's have the information session. I'm comfortable with that. Any other discussion? If not, this is the resolution before you, that the information session on the following provided to Council as soon as possible prior to the 27th of May 2022. Those in favour? It's carried without dissent. Councillors, we move now to the reception of deputations or delegations by appointment. We don't have any delegations today, but I have been speaking to the CEO's office, or I will certainly be today, in regarding to bring the University of Southern Queensland in next month. I think many of you who've been following the press and all the social media will know that they've had an amazing funding allocation in a very special area that will mean a lot to Toowoomba, and Brian, I'll certainly be talking to you about that today. Okay, thank you. No other matters there, and we'll move now to item 8, but before I do that, I'll read out our values of accountability, safety and well-being, of teamwork, of honesty and respect. And in doing that, we move to the reception and consideration of committee reports. And the first one is Planning and Development. What about the normal one of when Anne-Marie comes down? That's number 9. Righto, planning and development. Do you have the report before you? Anybody wishing to have any discussion about that matter? Stuart, do you have anything you need to add? Anyone wishing to take any matters out of that? If not, would someone like to move the receipt of that, please? Councillor Megan, Councillor Bill. Those in favour? It's carried. We move then to item 8.2 in respect to water. Someone like to move accordingly, please? Councillor Von Hoff and Councillor Summerfield. Those in favour? It's carried. Move then to item 8.3. Would someone like to move accordingly? Councillor Carroll, Councillor Melissa. Those in favour? It's carried. And item 8.4, which is the Environment and Community Committee. Anyone wishing to take anything of that out for separate consideration? If not, would someone like to move accordingly, please? Councillor James O'Shea, Councillor Tim McMahon. Those in favour? That is carried. We move then to item 8.5, which is Finance and Business Strategy Committee. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 matters there. Anyone wishing to take any matters out for separate discussion, consideration? If not, do I have a mover for the receipt of that report? Councillor Shine, Councillor McDonald. Those in favour? That's carried. We move then to economic development. Would someone like to move that report be received? Councillor O'Hara-Sullivan. Seconder, please. Councillor Carl. Those in favour? That's carried. Councillors, we move to item 9, which is the monthly financial performance statement. I'll call on Acting GM Anne-Marie Johnson to present that, please.
Good morning, councillors. So presenting the monthly performance statement for the period ending 30th of April as required by Section 204 of the Local Government Regulation. So 10 months in, 2 months to go this financial year. If we move to page 18 of 203 of Diligent Boards, or page 2 of 7 of the report, that refers to the April implications. So water charges were generated on the 30th of April, issued on the 6th of May with a due date for payment of the 7th of June. So councillors, this is the final issue of rates and levies for the current financial year. And I think it's interesting to note that we are actually $2.6 million under budget in the water rates due to lower than anticipated consumption directly as a result of the rain event. Moving along to the consolidated financial performance statement, so page 25 of 203. So our operating income tracking very closely to budget, with the overall variance there less than 1%. But it is clear to see the impact of water consumption on the rates and levies. Operating expenditure is tracking above budget at this time. Tracking below budget at this time. We can see the most significant item there is labour. So overall it's a 2%, but there's an 8% variance there in labour. So our current vacancy rates are 195, which are impacting on this result. The EB increase has now been applied to all wages and allowances across the organisation, but we're still working on the back pays, but they will be processed before the 30th of June. Our staff turnover currently trending downwards, so 11.68 for the month compared to 13.57 year to date. So it's starting to look a little bit healthier there. And moving down to capital, so our income, overall capital income, we've got a variance of 2% there. All items tracking to budget with the exception of sale of assets. And as I reported last month, that was property sold in Highfields that wasn't included in the original budget. So the most important item on the report at the moment, we move along to capital. So at this stage, we have delivered 50% of revised capital or 55% of the original capital budget. So there are variances right across the organisation and across all asset class as a direct result of the inclement weather, supply chain issues, and of course vacancies. These issues and others will be addressed when we're developing the 22-23 Capital Works programme, which we'll be bringing to you tomorrow.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the PM? Councillor Summerfield?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Anne-Marie. Anne-Marie, just in relation to the CapEx, you know that's always my popular question. I just wonder how much of that is actually delivered on the ground rather than committed funding?
I'll have to take that question on notice, and I'm happy to send an email out with practical completion across the organisation.
Thank you. I'd actually like the organisation to consider perhaps detailing that in the report, because it gives us a more realistic idea of how much we're actually delivering on the ground in our CapEx rather than just how much is committed funding.
Yep, happy to
That would be
take that one.
fantastic
Yes.
if we could. Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Carl?
Whilst it may not be directly related to this report, but it's in formulation of the next financial year's capital works program, the budget. What measures are we investigating around advice, or are we seeking external advice other than our normal approaches, given the changed climate? And I'm not talking about the climate as in the weather, but all of these influences that are impacting not just on us, but the whole of the community. So I guess, are we taking some extra steps around forecasting and future people commenting about the future, those relevant authorities?
So, Council, we had the Manager's Strategic Planning Economic Development presenting at the first budget session a couple of weeks ago, and certainly taken on board, working very closely with internal factors and external factors while we're developing the budget.
I'm just wondering if we might not investigate some external expertise around forecasting, things that are universal to organisations such as these in the local government sector and outside of. It might give us a layer of information that is useful in us forecasting or setting our budgets ahead. If we continue to do budgets the same way as we have, relying on, and this is no, I don't wish to cast doubt upon internal expertise. There are some brilliantly qualified people within our organisation. However, I said before, there are controls outside of there are influences outside of our control. So somewhere along the line, we probably need to, given the momentous change, we probably need to look at seeking external professional advice that are authorities on this, and in helping organisations of some 1,700 strong to make some deliberations about how we set our business moving forward. That's all. I'm not saying it might be beneficial for us. So are we entertaining that? It's probably a question more to CEO.
So we work very closely with LGFP, the local government finance professionals, and every council in Queensland is experiencing the same challenges we are at the moment with supply chain, with vacancies, and with obviously the weather event and the impact on delivering projects, both operational and capital. So we have had a couple of roundtable sessions. We have representatives from our team working with them. We're also working with the department, with Queensland Treasury Corporation. So I think most councils that we interact with are going through exactly what we're going through. But we are going to consider that in the report that we take to you tomorrow with the draft Capital Works programme for next year.
Thanks.
Given the breadth of your question, Councillor Cole, I might ask the CEO if he wishes to make some comments.
Councillor, I'd just like to add on to what Anne-Marie's just said there. LGAQ does collect a lot of these inflationary pressures that we have to deal with, and they've got some data around that they compare across, which they provide to councils, and certainly as part of the enterprise agreements and budget formulations, they provide that information to us. So that's a source that collects it specific to the effects that affect local government. So that information is readily available from LGAQ.
Any further questions for the GM? Councillor McDonald.
Thanks, Mr Chair. Through you to Anne-Marie. Just to comment first, Anne-Marie, if you don't mind, in regard to the budget reduction from a forecast to actuals in regard to water. $2.6 million. And fortunately, I guess, with the rain, we've seen the need to not require any water from Wivenhoe. So that will hopefully go some way of assisting in that regard, that shortfall. And a comment was made a few months ago in regard to, the savings of not having the water being pumped from Wivenhoe and the savings that can be realised through the organisation. This is a reality that people are using less water as well. So those two seem to have not so much balanced each other out. In fact, we're a little bit in a deficit. We will be for this financial year in regard to that. But I guess that's something that will wash through over the next month or so when we do our final deliberations for the P&Ls. The question really was around the capital program, and I know we have a session tomorrow in regard to the next financial year, 22-23, and the discipline that is now required for all local governments around the capacity to complete a capital program, given all of the complexities that are confronting us, or have confronted us and will continue in the next 12 months. So I guess the question to you then is around, from an organisational perspective, how do yourself and the CEO, given the CEO has a clear KPI on delivering of a capital program within a percentage range as part of the KPIs for this organisation, how is that being received by the organisation? And I guess that may be a comment from the CEO rather than from you. And the reason I say that is, quite clearly, when we hand down a budget, it is our commitment to the community to deliver on that budget. Historically, we see a carryover of between $15 to $22 million each year, and it looks like it's heading in that direction for this year. So the discipline around our capital budget for next financial year is probably nothing like we've seen it in the past. We have struggled with that. We worked really hard for this current financial year, capping at 165. We've been disciplined in our assessment of that at BR1 and BR2. But what's confronting us now, like all local governments, as you've said, is something like we haven't seen before. So the question perhaps might be better answered by the CEO in regard to the discipline that's required, and I guess the realisation that these headwinds are still here, and how we as an organisation handle that by delivering a budget that is realistic but also can be delivered in full by the organisation.
Just a couple of things. Obviously, the way of technically passing on what council's request is from the organisation, it's included in my KPIs, which will cascade down throughout the organisation, through to the general managers and through the managers in relation to the delivery and the expectations of the delivery of capital works. The other thing is, we certainly have a lot of historical evidence on the capability to deliver and the amount that we actually can deliver with the current resources we have within the organisation. So I think we need to heed that as the benchmark that we need to set our budgets to, or closer to that, rather than to what we think we can afford over the years, because I think generally we have not been able to spend our capital works for various reasons. So I think if we come in with a lower set capital works and an expectation that a very high percentage of that's delivered, if through good events and good luck and good management we get to near the end of the financial year and we've spent 100% of our budget, I think there's an opportunity then to actually look about at BR2 topping up your budget to do additional works if that's the case. But I think history will prove that if we actually set our budgets our capital budget at a lower level and try to achieve 100% of that, it takes a lot of pressure off the organisation as well to make sure that things are delivered economically and efficiently rather than to be delivered making sure you spend your budget base as well. So it's actually a good thing in relation to that. So I think when we do our capital works planning, it'll be a good opportunity for us to say, historically, what have we spent, where are we going to, and setting it at a more realistic point initially, and set the expectation that that lower level is delivered fully.
Thanks, CEO. I appreciate those words. If I could just note, and I note in your report through you, Mr Chair, through the CEO, that we've been fortunate enough through Queensland Treasury to have the same rating, credit rating of sound with a neutral outlook. But I note in your commentary, and we will get to that, but I'll mention it now because it's relevant. I note in your commentary that the underspend of capital, and again, we're not the Lone Ranger here. There's right across the state, and in fact the country's the same. But there would be pressures from Queensland Treasury in regard to delivery of that capital program, and then another one of your KPIs to maintain that credit rating of sound with a neutral outlook. So I guess that is another, if you like, barometer that we need to measure off, and it's a critical one for our community to know that we are financially able to deliver the services that we are expected to deliver year in, year out. And that's where the 3-year capital program, I would hope, is taken into account, the new 3-year capital program is taken into account when deliberations are around the cap of what we work towards to deliver in the capital program. Probably no need to comment. It's really just a...
Yeah, you've summarised it well, basically.
Any further questions for the GM? Councillor Carol Taylor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Not a question. I just, to the GM, I guess, through you, the forces that we're dealing with and the variables that we're dealing with this year, this financial year, are quite extraordinary. Quite extraordinary. Because we've got a perfect storm of the COVID-related issues, the shortages, the lack of staff, which we have in very important positions, and actually the weather where our roads are being chewed up. So there's going to be a huge repair job there. So, and should councillors think it's just local government, it has been mentioned in this room, it isn't. It's actually corporates as well. So there's very little capacity out there anywhere at the moment, and everyone, even in the corporate world, is facing the same issues that we're facing. So I wouldn't like our community to not understand why this is the biggest reason this year. The factor is those reasons, but including the inclement weather, which has been unheard of since December. So I wouldn't, I mean, I very much appreciate in this room, I very much want to mention the efforts of our staff teams, and I wouldn't want them to feel that we are putting extra pressure on them in what is an extraordinary situation. And I know, I have great faith that we'll do the best we can, but I actually don't think it's a fact of we need this done, get it done. Anyhow, you have to have it done. There's so much pressure at the moment on people that I think they're performing to their very, very best. And I think we have to be, and our community needs to be a little bit understanding about the extraordinary conditions that we are facing now. It's not just councils, it's lots of companies, particularly in construction and building, as we've seen in the paper every single day. So our management, I have great faith in our management, and I don't believe we know what's to be done. It's just getting out there to do it and having the people there that we need to do it, and the goods and services that we need to carry out those works.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Any other comments or questions around the room for the GM? If not, would someone like to move the receipt of the monthly financial performance statement, please. Councillor McDonald and Councillor Shine. Any comments? Those in favour? Motion is carried. We move to item 10, which is a group report, and Stuart Summers, General Manager in Planning and Development. Over to you, Stuart.
Good morning, Mayor. Good morning, councillors. The monthly report's before you, and I'm more than happy to take questions, if you have any.
Are there any questions for the GM? Councillor Megan O'Hara-Sullivan.
Oh, thanks, Mr Mayor. I wondered, Stuart, it's not in your report, but two things. One, whether you might talk about the launch of the strategy yesterday, Our Futures, and also to talk about where some of the strategic planning senior staff are down in Hobart, and we're in line for an award, I believe. Is that right?
Yep. We might make that announcement after. We don't want to be presumptuous.
Okay. If you wouldn't mind talking about the Futures launch yesterday.
Yes, I'm very happy to do that, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to do that. There was two items being launched yesterday. The strategic framework, which is the broad, high-level elements that guide the rest of the scheme, was launched yesterday, and the growth plan, which is very important as a guidance for both the planning scheme itself, but most importantly for all the infrastructure planning staff that are around the organisation, to know what it is that they're aiming to service going forward to 2051. Because we are part of that strategic framework. We are looking at a projected additional population coming to live in the region of around 55,000 people by 2051. So being prepared for those numbers coming is very important. And over the next 4 weeks, there'll be opportunities right across the region to look at the growth plan for people, residents, business people, development industry, agencies for that matter, state agencies, federal agencies, to have a look at what council is thinking, what it's talking about, the sort of growth that we're looking at, and the opportunities and constraints to that growth. So we're really looking forward to getting as much information back from the community and suggestions and ideas back from the community. That would be very, very good. We're using many platforms to get out to the community. I think council was briefed some weeks ago about, I think there's about 26 different types of platforms and approaches we're using this time to try and elicit, encourage as much feedback as possible. I'll leave it there.
Any further questions for the GM? Councillor McMahon.
Thanks, Chair. Stuart, just looking at our development services, when we have MCU applications or meetings, we've talked in the past about the timeframes, and we're pretty good at meeting timeframes. I'm noticing your report, it's, we're good at meeting timeframes. There are some outside the timeframe necessary. Would you have a reason for why those ones within that don't meet the timeline, those 2 out of 10, or the 2 pre-lodgement meetings, would you say it's a fault of council, or perhaps a not complete application that is the reason for them not meeting timelines?
It's a question that's asked often. Every development application is different. Every land use is different. It brings with it different constraints and opportunities, different approaches by the applicant and by consultants. what we do as a constant is encourage or attempt to encourage applicants to document their applications well. In other words, if there are traffic issues, if there are noise issues, if there are environmental issues of some sort, to make sure that the information relating to that is provided in a very professional manner, and done in consultation with both the planning staff but also the specialist staff, often that are spread throughout the organisation. If that's done and it's done well, it can be pretty well guaranteed that the application will go through very quickly and in accordance with the timeline set in the legislation. Okay. If that doesn't happen, then of course we can't guarantee those timelines, because we then have to seek that information, because we can't make a decision on many of the applications without that information being provided, and we can't expect the ratepayers to pick up the tab for us to go out and get consultants to get that information. So it is incumbent upon the applicant to provide that information so that we can make a decision. In other words, an applicant should be trying to help themselves to that information to help us, so we can help them in return for the fast and quick return.
So the 4 pre-lodgement requests with 2 pre-lodgement meetings,
yep.
I mean, 2 out of 4, I mean 50%, but
that's right.
Where's the...
Often that's to do with trying to align calendars and things like that. Yep.
Sure.
It's a functional factor. We set,
sure.
I think, 10 days to do that. Sometimes there are weekends and public holidays and things that intervene that push that out.
Thanks, Stuart. Welcome the answer. Appreciate it.
Are there any further questions for the GM? If not, would someone like to move the receipt of that report? Councillor Bill Carl has moved that. Councillor Megan O'Hara-Sullivan has seconded that. Those in favour? Thanks very much, Stuart.
Thanks, councillors.
We now move to Water and Waste Services. Damien.
Good morning, Mr Mayor. Good morning, councillors. Mr Mayor, will take the report as read, but if I may seek your indulgence to give a brief update with the current flood event. Councillors, we stood up the emergency action plan on the 11th of May. Crestbrook peaked over the weekend at 1.63 metres over the spillway. In the February event, it was 0.48 metres over the spillway. Perseverance was 0.68 metres over the spillway on the weekend. In the February event, it was 1.12 metres over the spillway. Kubi was 0.21 of a metre over the spillway on this weekend, and in the February event, 0.54 of a metre over the spillway. Councillors, we have had no damage reported to our assets. Our dam structures are fine. We have been doing progressive assessments. On Saturday, the call was made in the morning to deploy the flood barrier around our pump station at Wivenhoe, and we'll be sharing a photo of that in due course, Mr Mayor. That's a very impressive piece of kit that was put up in a day, and I thank the teams for doing that. Crestbrook, right now as we stand, is 0.65 of a metre over the spillway, and we'd like to thank all of our water and waste staff that have performed superbly over the weekend, not only in relation to the dam flood event, but also when these sorts of rainfalls come through, Mr Mayor, we have sewage overflows and pump stations stopping. We had some challenges with a number of pump stations over the weekend. The Crestbrook water level got so high that we had to isolate C1 so that the flood water wouldn't come, well, did come into the tower. It was about 15 centimetres over the floor of the tower. We're actually running sump pumps off generators there and progressively turning that pump on and off, isolating it and reconnecting it to power as we could. So it was a pretty busy weekend, Mr Mayor. We had some issues with Kubi Dam. Some of the pumps there were misbehaving. But I'd like to put a great big thank you out to, after the February event, Mr Mayor, all of our staff followed fatigue, and I think I reported to Council that I was the only one that didn't. This event we put in steps, Friends of Dams, and we reached out across Council to train people up, to assist them so that our trained operators could be there with a buddy, and that worked very well. So through this event, we've all accorded with our fatigue rules, myself included, Mr Mayor. And I'd like to thank all the staff for their response over the weekend and continued response now, Mr Mayor.
Yeah, well, can I just personally thank you and endorse your comments there. It was, you know, the amount of work that immediately went into action the moment this rain event began, the last rain event began. I really appreciate that, and I think we're surrounded by some people who have a passion to get things right, and of course protecting our dams is a key part of that. So I thank you very much for that on behalf, not only my colleagues here, but the community.
You're welcome, Mr Mayor.
Any questions for the GM? Councillor Shine.
Yeah, no, thanks, Chair. Could I support your remarks of commendation to Damien and his staff for the work they've done, and just recall to mind the fantastic contribution that our employees in this department, as well as the other departments, have done over the years, which was brought to mind by the recognition ceremony last week at Highfields, some of whom have up to 45 years loyal service to this organisation, and it was appropriate for that to be recognised, but I think it's good for the general public to be made aware of the fact that the services that they take for granted are as a result of that skill and determination and loyalty that many, if not all, employees of this council contribute. My question, however, is in relation to your report under active assets, and it refers to the Perseverance Energy Supply Resilience Project, and in particular it refers to the electrical line through the forestry between Peachey and Perseverance Dam, and the fact that Ergon have put in new poles. Bearing in mind the comments of the Mayor and Councillor Taylor earlier about the rainfall conditions that we've had over the last 9 months or whatever, one assumes that there's going to be a lot of fuel as a result of that in the forthcoming fire seasons, etc. Just wondering if you could perhaps, if you're able to, if not take it on notice, to provide some embellishment of what this project is all about, and how in particular in that Peachey and Crow's Nest area where the fires were more recently, how that may be of benefit to alleviating the risk.
Councillor Shine, in late 2019, November into December, the entire catchment's burnt. We lost power to what we call C1, which is at the dam at Crestbrook, and C2, which is across the road from the Speedboat Club at Perseverance. The fire had taken out, there were wooden poles strung from the Powerlink transmission lines to Perseverance Dam off up to the top left-hand side, that escarpment up on the top left-hand side of the dam wall of Perseverance. It's a very high string there. There's 2 poles up the top there, and then it comes down into Crestbrook. We progressively lost many of those wooden poles. We were in constant contact with CEO at the time of Energy Queensland, a dear old friend, and those poles, when they burn, it's a funny thing. They still hang. They lose the bottom 1.5 metres to 2 metres of the pole. So you actually get the 2 outer poles stringing and holding that up. They lost one of the poles up to the left of Perseverance. We were firebombing with helicopters in to defend these wooden poles coming to Perseverance. And if you remember, Councillor Shine, we were only running Toowoomba off that one Perseverance pump station at that time. About Thursday following, I think it was, we had Ergon in there. The fires were still burning, and they were restringing and putting in new poles out to get power to Crestbrook. These poles are fire resistant, so they are made of fiberglass. And a local success story here, Mr Mayor, those cross arms, ordinarily they are made of wood. This is a composite material. It is made by a Toowoomba manufacturer, and that is exclusively used throughout Queensland by Ergon Energy. When lightning strikes poles, that can start fire as well. And it also, was out there with Ergon, it does a couple of things. It actually fries all the sap out of the wood. You wouldn't think an old bush pole would have much sap in it, but it does. So when you cut that pole up and put it in your fire, it won't burn. It will sit there and simply won't burn. These fiberglass poles have a conductor in it so that they send any lightning strikes straight to ground. You wouldn't want to be in proximity of them if there was a lightning strike. But certainly this resilience project means that the power to Perseverance pump station is much more secure than it was. So much so that if there was another fire event, yes, you would have to monitor it. We do clear out the undergrowth from around these easements, but we would have the opportunity to be able to defend with helicopters into C1 and into C2. Those wooden poles will remain at the moment, but we are actually treating, putting some barriers around the bottom few metres of those poles to defend them in the event of another fire.
Thank you very much.
I do, thank you, Chair. I was just wondering about sewer overflows. I received a call in the last few days from a couple down in Clifton who they commenced having sewer overflows in their yard on the 8th of March, and obviously it has continued, and I just wonder how quickly we can actually get in and help these people and ensure that it's an environmental health hazard, just how quickly we can assist them, and what reporting we have to do in relation to that sort of thing. I mean, that has an environmental impact as well, the potential health impact. And I just wonder, do we report that to state government? Do we, where's the reporting in our council reports and that sort of thing?
I'll take the specific incident in Clifton on notice, Councillor Summerfield. I'm not aware of that particular instance myself, but I'll circulate a response to that. In relation to reporting, yes, depending on the volume that comes out, all of these, as a wastewater provider, all of our sites have licence conditions, and any overflows of a certain volume are reported to through the pollution hotline in the first instance, followed up by a documented report to the Department of Environment and Science, and that is the reporting. We do actually put in our monthly report sewer overflows, so I'll check if that one from March was in that April report.
Thank you. I couldn't see any in this month, so I thought we had it previously, but I couldn't see any. But I did wonder in relation to volume and what volume it is, how you measure that to decide whether it's reported to state government or not.
So we do a computation. We know the duty cycle of pumps. We know the volumes that are going through when that pump is operating. If we have, for example, lost power in a pump or had an overflow, we calculate it from the volumes that are coming through, and we calculate for the duration of that time that we believe that it was compromised, and we come up with an estimate of the overflow.
Okay, thank you. And we do a complete clean-up of the site as well?
Yes, we do. In all instances, irrespective of the volume, it is business as usual to do disinfection of the site. Often, if it's near a watercourse, there is water quality monitoring upstream and downstream and at the site. So there's a number of things that are taken into consideration, yes.
Yeah, good. I think these people will look forward to that because they particularly are now having their home referred to in a derogatory term by local people because it's been going on for some time. So I look forward to seeing something done for those people. Thank you.
You finished, Councillor Summerfield. Councillor O'Hara-Sullivan, thanks.
Damien, I wanted to say a big congratulations about the Clifton GAB war and the RO treatment down there. As someone who lived in Clifton, I think that's going to change people's lives having that water. What I wanted to ask though, is there going to be any other opportunity for the locals to sort of celebrate the opening of that? I just noted that there sort of wasn't anyone from like the Progress Association or the business group down there at the opening or any locals at all. Is there going to be anything more official to open it or anything like that?
Councillor Megan, we extended some notice to the opening and we had some of the local press and in attendance, but as I was there a couple of minutes late, Mr Mayor, but I was there. I wasn't planning on doing anything else, but I can discuss it with our stakeholder group. We have the wastewater treatment plant there that we are working on as well. The liners are going in as we speak. So there's quite a bit of work going on in Clifton community.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Damien.
Any further questions for the GM? Councillor McDonald.
Just a quick one, if I could, Mr Mayor, through to Damien. Damien, can you just remind us in regard to the smoke detector situation? There's been some places that have identified as having some issues in the annual smoke test. That's on page 30 of the report. What is the process thereby where people have had that issue through their house? How do they get notified and do they need to do anything without any notification?
No, we do give notices. We essentially give 3 notices. Councillor McDonald, first is a very friendly, we've identified issues with your property, please rectify. Second is a reminder, we let you know, please rectify. We try to avoid taking enforcement actions. We work with our community. Ultimately, through Stuart Summers' group, there are local enforcement officers that are licensed under the Plumbing and Drainage Act to step into the property, give an enforceable action to take rectification works. Normally these things we get cooperation in a reasonable time frame.
Thank you. Any further questions, Councillor McDonald? Councillor Shine?
Yeah, just on that, I'm just wondering what are the major or the most common problems arising that you find in relation to these tests?
Illegal connections of downpipes from roofs, be it sheds or be it the main house, into the sewage system, and the sewage system simply isn't built to collect and transport stormwater. It's there and sized for it's sized in a particular way so that for effluent. If you make it too big, the effluent won't flow when there's only effluent and you put rainfall into it. If you make it too small, you can't push the effluent up. So there is an optimal sizing of pump stations and pipes for a catchment, and that's where we work with our planning colleagues to size our infrastructure appropriately so that it's not too big too early, which is inefficient, and illegal connections of stormwater compromise the sewage systems.
Any further questions? Briefly, Mr GM, can you just give us a quick update on the land that's been purchased at Wivenhoe for the new pump station? Has there been any further progress made in respect to that?
Mr Mayor, we've done a preliminary costing estimate on what it would be to put duplicate, so what we call standby, so 2 pumps, both connected. At the moment, our current position at Wivenhoe pump station is we have 2 pumps, one's in the shed and one's connected. So if we had a broken motor or a broken pump, we can replace it, but it takes a period of time. So the plan is to have an upgraded, costings have been provided to us for a duty standby, upgraded pump set at that land. My understanding at the moment is that we are seeking or have found an interim tenant for that property whilst we program and plan and design and then try and fund a pump set there.
I think the purchase of that land and the plans we have for that are very much part of our water future between now and possibly 2050. Using that Wivenhoe pump line to pump water this way if we need it, when we need it. So I'm pretty pleased about that. I think that's a solid legacy.
It's a very good piece of land to sit on, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any further questions for the GM? If not, despite the absence of two councillors, I think we could move on with a motion. Who would like to move that report be received, please? Councillor Von Hoff. Seconder, please, Councillor McMahon. Those in favour?
Mr. Mayor.
It's carried without. Thanks very much, Damien. We move now to infrastructure services. Mike Brady.
Good morning, councillors. Mr Mayor. The report, councillors, for the month of April is there. Gives you a good overview and take that as read. And probably just, obviously, the last week has added to our woes as far as wet weather and a subsequent declared event. So teams are very busy out there. Happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions for the GM? Councillor Shine, starters, and Councillor Carol Taylor.
Thanks, Chair. Could I also endorse the remarks of Councillor Taylor earlier this morning in relation to your team in particular, what you've done recently in relation to these recurring flood events and the feedback in relation to the promptness of fixing up potholes here and there and everywhere, and it's a great credit to you and to your team. Just a couple of small ones. In your report, page 1, refers to Bridge Street road closure, and it says permanent. I'm just wondering,
Yeah,
might explain that, and also further on it refers to a new roundabout at Herries and Merry. Just why that was necessary, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, no, thank you, Councillor Shine. The first one in regards to the Bridge Street road closure is actually the front element of a footpath. I've actually sent some maps out to councillors, but it's a permanent closure to bring the property boundary into line with the others on the northern side of Bridge Street in that location. So it's just a few metres of road reserve that really was a historical element, and the request for that, so we didn't have any objections to that. And the second one was the dead end of Rishule Road at the eastern end, and again I've sent some maps out. The closure was previously approved in 2019, and at that time the resident didn't go forward with it at that time. So this was a reissuing of that approval. And then with the roundabouts in Herry Street, at Mary and Mackenzie Street, over the last 6 months, 12 months, when we actually did the East and West Creek major drainage projects on James Street, and the James Street was closed. We had to modify those two roundabouts so the heavy vehicles could get through, in particular B-doubles. And so they've been now put back and upgraded. And that was all part of the cost of the project, the greater project from TMR. So the cost of that was covered with that. And we've actually, you'll note that we've actually changed the shapes of them a little bit, just so that in the future, if we have to, for whatever reason, be an accident or whatever, James Street gets closed, Harry Street will be in a position to take the heavies if that need ever arises again.
Thank you. No, thanks, mate.
Any further questions for the GM? Councillor Carroll.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Not questions, but I just want to ask Mr Brady if he might pass on council's and our community's thanks to our C&M teams. And I understand what's happened over the 4th or 5th, whatever it is, weather event. We've had people out trying to issue road closed signs and everywhere else where they, whilst these events are on, trying to keep our community safe. And in some areas, most areas, they've managed to do that. And then also, as Councillor Shine has mentioned, we've had potholing crews all out over the weekend. And, you know, it hasn't been easy, I guess, that this is just another in an ongoing need that has to be met, I suppose, to keep our community safe. And I understand in water and waste, they're talking about fatigue. It is also the same through across council, I would suggest. So I'd just like Mr Brady to pass that on, and thanks to him as well, because he's had a very busy weekend and our whole teams. And I think it's just across council, I know, in parks and gardens and stuff too. But the road issues are so important and so urgent, and they've been out in these weather conditions and just going over and above what they need to do, and I'm aware of that. And I'd just like to pass that on. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Yeah, thanks very much, Carol, and I'm sure that everyone in the room endorses that, but it's times like this where you realise the critical role that external funding plays at times like this. And I thank you, Mike, for the work that I've seen you do in recent times, seeking that external funding, and your capability of doing that, of course, has been demonstrated in the past, and I thank you very much for that. Any further questions for the GM? If not, do I have a mover, please, that report be received? Councillor Carroll.
Excuse me, Mr.
Seconder,
Sorry.
Councillor Melissa.
No, may I
Oh, you
please
have a
make-
question?
Yes, thank you.
Well,
Thanks.
I'll take the mover and the seconder. Are you happy with that? And I'll take your question now.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Mr Mayor. I just want to echo the comments of councillors around the table during the flood events. Such a trying time for our teams and the community. So just really wanted to extend and echo my thoughts and thank you for that. But I also want to raise awareness of National Road Safety Week this week. So Councillor Carol Taylor and you, Mayor, were present yesterday at the media launch and the launch of the week. And this is a really important week for all of us to remember and raise awareness when we are in the car, when we're, you know, must be aware of pedestrians and cyclists and all those road users. It's really important that we raise awareness of Road Safety Week. We want to pledge to drive so others survive, and we must remember that road safety is everyone's responsibility. To be aware of the fatal 5, distraction, drink and drug driving, seatbelts, fatigue and speeding, and the terrible effects that such tragic incidents have on the families of the victims, our first responders of emergency services and our community. And I'd like to thank our first responders for all they do, because they are first on scene, and it must be some of the most tragic events and have horrific consequences on our first responders and the families of the victims. So I extend our thanks to them for all they do for our community and raise awareness of National Road Safety Week. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I think those of us who were there, Councillor Carroll and myself, endorse your remarks. And I think your remarks, particularly in respect to those first responders, is very fitting, because a lot of people do a lot of work around road safety, but it's those people, the first responders, who actually turn up, and very often they're confronted by a very tragic scene. So our thanks go to those people. I have a mover, I have a seconder. Those in favour? Receipt of that report. Thanks very much. That's carried. Thank you very much, Mike. And
Thank you, councillors.
hand over now to Nick. Excited about some of the football results the last week, I'd imagine.
Very exciting football results. Good morning, councillors. The monthly report for the ECS groups presented for your consumption. I'm happy to take any questions that you might have in relation to that report.
Not a question, just a comment, Nick, and I guess you might want to add something to it. The First Five Forever, having a 4-year program, that seems to be, is that the first time that we've had a consistent period? Because I thought there was at one stage a period of time when it was multiple year.
When it was originally and initially launched, that program, I think we had about 3 years worth of funding, but that came to an end probably about 3 years ago, and since that time it's been annual funding. And the challenge for us there is we're relying on that state government grant to provide that program, so we're only able to plan for 12 months in advance. And the real challenge is attracting and retaining people to run the program, because we can only ever advertise and appoint people for the 12 months, so it makes it less attractive than if you're able to guarantee 4 years worth of employment. So it's very, very good outcome. I think.
Good result, yeah, thank you. Good on you.
Are there any further questions? Councillor Carol Taylor?
No, I think I endorse Councillor McDonald's remarks there, and I love this program. I think it's just such an important early education program, and when you go and see the young ones there and you know, even the little tiny, it's just amazing, makes a huge difference, and I know our staff just love to embrace that. So it's good to see the funding is a little bit more settled. So I think it's a program we'd hate to lose. Yeah.
Any further questions? Councillor Melissa Taylor?
Thanks, Chair. Hi, Nick. Thanks for your report. I just want to say thanks to all the staff for the Anzac Day ceremonies this year. After the last 2 years of not being able to really gather the way we would like to, this year was particularly special. Well, I felt particularly special because of the last 2 years, and you know, a lot of people braved the weather to come out, and the staff that supported our local communities was really lovely, and some beautiful ceremonies that we were all privileged to attend this year was, but for me particularly, really special. So can you just pass on my thanks?
I'll definitely pass that on. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Any further questions? I may have a conversation with you in the not too distant future. I had breakfast this morning with Marcus Jones, the principal of the Wilsonton High School, and he brought to me the concept of his grade 10 students are in fact doing a certificate in volunteering, which would be a great lesson for young people that age. And he was looking for opportunities as to where these people can volunteer. So it's probably an opportunity for us to show a degree of leadership and direction for some of these young people in terms of volunteering, because I think we'll all agree that volunteering, giving is a fair bit more, has a bit more impact on a young person than taking. So any other questions for the GM? If not, would someone like to move? Councillor O'Shea has moved, Councillor McMahon seconded the receipt of that report. Those in favour? That's carried. We'll move then to item 10.5, which is Finance and Business Strategy. Anne-Marie.
Morning again, councillors. Happy to take the report as read and take any questions.
Are there any questions for the General Manager? Councillor Shine.
Thanks, Chair. Just a comment really in relation to that first item, being the award win for the ICT Business Information Management team. It seems to be a very highly regarded award, and congratulate your team for what they've achieved. You might like to expand on that.
So this is the work they've done in collecting, collating and preserving records from across the region. So legacy historical records, and the innovative way they've managed to preserve that critical part of our history.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor McDonald.
question first and then a comment, I guess. And the question's without notice, Anne-Marie, but it's around the numbers of staff that may be away due to being a close contact or being affected by COVID. Do you have any figures on what that may be? I just note that councillors have received a couple of emails in regard to service standards being compromised to a degree around customer service centres in regard to having to close a couple a little earlier. Not major, but...
Happy to hand over to Brian.
Thank you.
The CEO will answer that question.
Thank you.
Just as of yesterday, we had 31 positive cases in the organisation and 6 close contacts. We've been monitoring that every day, basically, and we're going through a bit of a elevated trend at this particular point in time. There was one a couple of weeks ago, and it's just elevated again lately, so it's certainly still an issue within the organisation. But to the credit of most, to everybody in the organisation, we've been able to probably keep delivering the services that we need to do. And we've had people, some people who are close contacts can still work from home, which is good. But there certainly is a relatively consistent incidence at this point in time in the organisation, so it's still there, and we've still got to be very careful.
I guess just following on from that, all the medical fraternity seem to be singing of the same song around the upcoming flu season and the effects that may have on the organisation. So I guess having the program of flu vaccination through the organisation is something that will hopefully guard us to a degree of that, but it is something that I thought we should raise to the community just so that they are aware that council doesn't have a big barrier around them that keeps them away from these things that the community has. Because anecdotally we've heard from schools and other organisations that they are suffering the same at the moment. So it's just something, as I say, around headwinds of things that are happening. This is a realistic thing. But the very positive story through you, Mr Chair, to the General Manager is around our local spend once again and cracking 67%, some $18 million locally spent for the month of April. And I've said it in the past and I'll keep saying it ad nauseum, and I make no apologies for that. This is the greatest economic impact that we can have on our community as far as helping people stay employed, be employed, and putting back to the community. And this is a clear example of being able to do that. So I just wanted to once again reinforce that this was a council decision to focus on local spend, and this is a clear example of the operational team delivering on that strategy. So I just wanted to commend you on that. And 65%, 160 mil for year to date is a great result.
Terrific.
Thank you.
Yep, I think it's something that we can be justifiably proud of. Councillor Rebecca, you had a question?
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, thanks, Anne-Marie. Page 2 of 4 of your report, when we're talking about positions advertised and the permanent staff turnover rate and then the current vacant permanent positions of 195. So along with several of my council colleagues, I had the pleasure of attending the Recognition of Service Awards evening last week, and I was having a conversation with some of our staff. And one of the things that they brought up, which I found really interesting, was that when we are advertising for a position, we used to say these qualifications or equivalent experience.
Yes.
And what they were saying was that we no longer use we no longer say or equivalent experience, so it's just the qualifications. And I wonder if, through you or through the CEO, there'd been thought given to, at this time where we're really trying to attract and retain our staff, if there'd been thought given to the merit of potentially saying not just the qualifications that are required, but the life experience as well.
Yes, there absolutely has. That's something that is being considered now for all positions. We're we're reviewing all position descriptions. And I think adding to that, we had a new officer commence on Monday to start up our own temp pool, where we're hoping to train, develop our own staff, plus members of the community, so we can fill gaps at a moment's notice, we hope. So certainly looking at all options, including relevant experience,
Yeah,
which
great.
we know is really important.
Thanks. It seemed to me that it is a potentially particularly relevant for the older workforce that we can get back in because they've got so much useful experience that they can contribute. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Any further questions? Someone like to move the receipt of that report, please? Councillor McDonald and Shine, those in favour? Someone like to move that we adjourn for 5 minutes for morning tea? Councillors O'Hara Sullivan and Councillor Shine. Those in favour? It's carried. I'll be pretty strict with the Start the meeting again, and I'll hand over now to the CEO, Brian Pidgeon, to present his CEO's report.
Thank you, councillors. Some of those issues in my report have been covered off already this morning, but if there's any questions, happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions for the CEO? No questions for the CEO?
I'm happy to move the report. Well, I think we've covered off on the things.
Yeah,
to be
we have
fair.
covered off.
I'm happy to move the report.
Councillor McDonald has moved. Is there a seconder for that report? Councillor Shine. Those in favour? That's carried. Thank you very much. Move then to my mayoral report. I'm happy to take it as read. I'll just, interesting to have James McKee, who's the Manager of Innovation and Performance, the City of Launceston, here. And his particular interest is in Council of Mayors and how we deal with one large entity and a whole series of smaller ones, given that Launceston is a rather large municipality, and there are a lot of very small ones around it. And that was his interest. I think much of the stuff there is understandable. I think one of the things that came out of the Council of Mayors reports, it's an absolutely stunning figure, not in a good sense, but there's 49 million tonne of soil they believe was moved by the floods earlier this year, and that's very significant indeed. I think they're planning on running a legacy program at ComSec in regard to the Olympics, and that may require some funding which will come to the various councils down the track. They're planning a trip to America to look at Los Angeles and a number of other things over there in regard to Vancouver in Canada, Los Angeles and a few other things over there, and it's a possibility that if Tisby were going, it may be an idea for us to connect with Weatherford in Texas. I'm not sure as to what we should do about all that yet, but we'll see in the future. Another interesting part of the meeting was Archbishop Mark Coleridge, the Catholic Archbishop from Brisbane, was looking at cooperation between the assets that he has and his church has and the broader local government area. The Local Government Association had an update there, and one of those things was in respect to electoral expenditure caps, and Councillor Shine has asked me a question. The brief from LGAQ is available to anyone who wants it in respect to election caps. I think they're the main things. I have been approached by a number of people in respect to the level of crime in Toowoomba and comparing that with Townsville, and the fact that Townsville in fact has now a task force. And I think we have to be very careful because our police are doing an amazing job in difficult circumstances. And it's my view that we'll collectively work on this. But the fact that I have been told in recent times in the order of 400 cars have been stolen this year. And I think it's probably time for external help for us in respect to that. So, look, they're the main things. I'm happy to take questions. Have been a number of visits from various parties during the month, and I think the moment that I can bring those matters to you, I'll certainly bring them to you. Councillor O'Shea.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Just touching on what you spoke about before, that 10th of May meeting around crime in Toowoomba. I mean, I think we all understand the growing concerns around it, and I think it's probably something that we're just going to see what role, or if any role, council does play. I can probably just say I've fielded numerous calls in recent times, particularly around our mobile camera and its availability and where it is and things like that, and I guess touching on those same issues of what you're talking about. So I think it's probably, I don't know how or what, and I said it's important, as you said, with where the responsibilities lie or what can be done, but certainly, as you said, I think it is something that continues.
No,
it's highlighted by that example you've put in here. But as I said, I can say I've never received more calls, particularly in recent times, about the mobile camera that we have in property services?
I'm receiving a lot of information coming out of people who've been impacted, and it's quite distressing for many of those people. But I think we've got to be very cautious and very mindful that we don't want to make people think it's worse than it is. But we do need to move, with the support of the state government, in my view, to have something similar to what Townsville's got, in that they have a crime task force. Councillor Rebecca.
Thank you, Mayor. Just two issues. Firstly, on the crime point that you're making, I agree wholeheartedly, and reiterate your comments that the police are doing an absolutely outstanding job, and it is something that I think all of us have probably been contacted about and or had personal experiences with, and the sheer numbers of people who are being affected is something that we all understand. Policing is a state government issue, but we really, here as a council, we're up to our elbows in the community, and we want to make sure that Toowoomba maintains its really high livability. And so your work with that is fantastic, and I agree. I just wanted to ask about the halfway through your report on the Olympics.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that.
Sorry, halfway through your report on the Olympics, and when you're talking about the ComSec Council's meeting to ensure legacy outcomes in the negotiations, and I just wonder if you can give some information about how do we square, or how are the ComSec Councils squaring that idea of having legacy outcomes but still falling within the definitions and within the requirements of the Olympics, that there's no new infrastructure. How do those two gel?
Well, I guess that the best example I can give you is the stadium owned by the state government in Toowoomba. Now, I've been begging Minister Hinchcliffe to come to town and to make the announcement that I'm aware of. I think that the idea that they have for the stadium in Toowoomba is about the fact that Toowoomba is quite a mature place. The population has grown, and they would like to contribute toward a venue where we can hold major events such as NRL, rugby union, soccer. We know that the state government is planning to have football/soccer events in Toowoomba during the Olympics. And if we are to do that, the stadium that we have has to be of a higher standard. It's not tied to the Olympics, it's tied to the future of Toowoomba, is what Minister Hinchcliffe is saying to me. And I think I'll be bringing a resolution forward soon in respect to the showgrounds. Whilst the advantage there will be, as one of the advantages will be the Olympics, but that the showgrounds host event after event after event, and that brings cash to this community, that brings activity to this community. And so it's all part of Toowoomba's growth, not necessarily tied to the Olympics, but valuable for the Olympics. And I don't know if that answers your question, but, you know, Toowoomba's growing. We deserve a stadium that'll hold 15,000 people. We deserve a centre of excellence for equestrian, because we are an equine centre here in many respects, at many levels. Councillor Carroll.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just to add to that, I'm very aware that out at the showgrounds and the Interschools Equestrian Association have held, I think, 3 nationals here in the last 5 or 6 years. And that is just almost like running an Olympics. They've got the dressage, the cross country and the other. So it does make sense that we are the centre of equine, thoroughbred, standard bred, all equestrian, warm bloods. There's just so much of our horse industry comes in this region. I just wanted to mention, though, you say about Minister Hinchcliffe and, the plans or the proposed, perhaps possible plans for the athletic oval. I have read where the seating there, most of it is going to be collapsible and taken away, just put there for the event. And I don't think, in my view, if that is the case, that's not a legacy for our community. The issue with that now when we have a football game is there's not enough seating there. And, you know, we've got people having to bring their own seats or sitting on the grass. I think that we need to quite unite about the fact that, okay, there might be some collapsible seating and taken, but we certainly need, if that ground is, it's not our ground, and I'm very pleased it's not, but if they're going to have stuff there and improve it, some of those improvements need to be left, i.e. seating, and not all put in and then taken away. So I support the showground. We will have, if we position ourselves well, we will have teams based here in the lead up to the equestrian events at the Olympics, wherever they are held, because we've got veterinary support here, we've got stabling here, there's no stabling down in Brisbane, only a little bit at the RNA, and we've got, you know, paddocks and everything else up here. It just makes sense that I think that we would attract at least one, but maybe more, overseas teams as they practice in the lead up to, and acclimatise in the lead up to the Olympic Games here. It just makes sense. But I just wanted two things. I support that concept, and the showground as it is can deal with those national interstate, and there's a lot of students come. They come from every state. They have already run those very, very, very successfully, and the expertise is here in the equestrian field to be able to be volunteers in that space. But also they've run about 4 or 5 interstate Queensland ones as well. So, but two things, I support that, but number 2, whatever is done to the athletic oval, I believe some permanent seating needs to be left there. And I think that we need to push back very strongly on that.
Councillor Carroll, I think it's very, very important that Minister Hinchcliffe gets here and tells this community what he's told me. It's not my job to do that, it's his job to do that, and I'll certainly be making yet another phone call today to Minister Hinchcliffe. Councillor Nancy.
Thank you, Chair. Just in relation to the crime in our city, seeing as how we're making a bit of commentary, I'm quite passionate about us as a council lobbying the state government. It's the state government's role to keep our communities safe, not local government. However, it's not being done, and therefore I feel we need to be lobbying the state government to do something about it. And, you know, you've got to look at the big picture here, and that is our jails are at over 150% capacity, which means it's dangerous for the criminals that are in there living in those conditions, but it's also very dangerous for those that are looking after them and protecting them. And so the problem that we've got is that there's no room in the jails, and I read in the paper about criminals doing really bad things and getting off on probation, and they should be going to jail. And if jail's not the answer, then the state government needs to come up with something else. And it could be that it's national service for 6 months. I don't know. But something's got to be done with the crime that's happening, not only in our region, but across Queensland. And it's just got to be fixed. People are being hurt, traumatised, their properties are being stolen, and we've got to do something about it. And if the state government's not going to do something, then we need to be lobbying them and shaming them into doing something about it. Because it's just wrong what's happening, not only in ours. If you look at the Goondiwindi Regional Council area, I was reading the list of crime that was put up by one of the councillors down there last night, and it was just appalling. So we've got to start looking after our communities, and if local government has to push them into doing something about it, then we jolly well should have to get in and do it.
Yep.
The state government's not.
And I think you would all agree that we've got to be very careful how we move forward on this journey. I think there's been an example set by Townsville in that they have now got a special group of people up there, in addition to the police, who are doing just what we're talking about we want done here. Why wouldn't we be similar at this stage to make sure it doesn't spread? We don't want the word to get out that there's a lot of crime in Toowoomba, that's not a good place. We don't want the word to get out that the police aren't doing their job. The police are working as hard as they can, and many of the comments you made in respect to the enormity of the problem, and the jails are full, all this sort of thing, are very relevant at this point in time. So we need to make sure that we do it well for Toowoomba, I think, and do it well and respectfully for those police who are giving their time.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I hope we do more than talk vested. It'd be great if something happened. But Councillor Paul, on page 2 of your report, down near the bottom in relation to Councillor Mayor's, the third dot point up, in addition, the mayors are blah, 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 additional levy of 300,000 across the 11 councils to add to the 200,000 already allocated from the existing budget. Have we already approved that in some form or another, or will that come to us?
My understanding very clearly of that is that will be brought to the various councils to be in support of working out what legacies we actually want in this region. And, I guess that it's a journey that we're on. I'm not making any commitment to it at this point in time, but I think it has to come back via the council. ComSec is in a very strong financial spot at the moment, and so there may be other ways of doing it. Okay, any further questions? Councillor Shine?
No, thanks, Mayor. Just a couple of things. Just on that topic of crime, I was pleased that you did confer with the Minister of Police only a few weeks ago in your own office and raised those matters with him at that stage. And no doubt he has taken that on board, and hopefully whatever can be done will be done to help address that issue. Just a couple of things. One was the visit to Canada and Vancouver in particular. Whoever goes on that, whether it be yourself or somebody from the council here or Tisby or whatever, I would just like a commitment that a visit to the Butchart Gardens at Vancouver be made at that time to update, so that we as a council might be updated with any progress made in that regard or any ideas for the development of the Quarry Gardens. And secondly, I note that, and you referred to it in your opening remarks, about the electoral expenditure caps raised by at the LGAQ. Just in relation to that, caps on spending also brings into vogue the question of remuneration to candidates for votes. You would be aware that both in federal elections and state elections, candidates who obtain over, I think, 4% of the vote are reimbursed for their expenditure to some extent, and that doesn't apply to local government, and I'm just wondering why that doesn't apply. I appreciate that the taxpayer pays for federal and state elections, and it may be that the ratepayer pays for local government, and it may not be a popular move, but I'm personally all in favour of caps and making them as low as possible. I think the amount of that money wasted on political advertising throughout the Commonwealth, the state and local government is a disgrace and an annoyance to most people watching TV or reading the paper or looking at what comes in their letterboxes. And I'd love to see it. Personally, I'd like to see it abolished altogether and just have public funded promotion, notwithstanding that there will be drawbacks to it in terms of reaction from perhaps ratepayers or taxpayers. But just wondering if that aspect of it could also be raised with the LGAQ when they further consider electoral expenditure caps as referred to you in your report.
I had a conversation with Alison Smith this morning, the CEO of LGAQ. This is a journey. They're fairly early in the journey at this point in time. And of course, if you follow the local government conferences, almost every conference there's reference to this sort of thing. Did I see you before, Councillor McDonald? You had a point, and then Councillor Carroll-Taylor.
I did. Just a couple of comments, Mayor, and I guess picking up on a couple of things that Councillor Summerfield mentioned in regard to crime, but this also fits with the the other things that have been mentioned around Olympics. The reason that Council is part of, Councillor Mayor, South East Queensland, and you lead the highly productive Councillor Mayor's Darling Down South West, is so that we can collaborate with other councils, and particularly, I guess, picking up on the crime element for the Darling Downs group, the Councillor Mayor's Darling Downs. It may be worth your while at the next meeting, which is in Gundawindi, I believe, that you have a district officer or perhaps the superintendent of police of that area actually talk about that, because we're very fortunate in our region that we have collaboration with all emergency services, and particularly Queensland Police Service, so much so that the Superintendent of Police is the Deputy Chair of Safer Toowoomba Regional Partnerships, of which there's been half a dozen programs that have been implemented over the last 6 months, funded through a variety of sources, but particularly state government in regard to various programs. But the police officers are sometimes at their wits' end as to what they can do for the very reasons that Councillor Summerfield mentioned. So the whole judicial system, the whole process needs a closer look at perhaps. But I think on the ground, having things happening, there's no greater group that can do that than the local community. And that's where I would urge you to utilise those forums in which to talk that through with the police in a rational manner, that some solutions can be found. And likewise with the Councillor Mayor South East Queensland, the commentary around the Athletic Oval or Clive Burgover Stadium, I see that as part of the reasons we're part of ComSec, is that you could use all of that lobbying power, if you like, to talk to government, not just Toowoomba Regional Council, and that runs through also with the item that you're bringing forward in regard to the Equine Centre, understanding that there could be competing interests for some of those SEQ areas. However, to have a collective of SEQ identifying this as one of those legacy projects, which, let's face it, is the Olympic Games gives us a point in time to aim for. But really what we're talking about is a legacy for a lot longer than that. So I don't think we should lose sight of the reasons we are part of ComSec and the reasons that you've started that Councillor Mayor's Darling Downs, and actually get some leverage off our involvement there, which you have in the past.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I agree with everything Councillor McDonald has just said. Back on the cap on elections, I do believe we've all received an email asking for our views on what that comes to. The way the state operates at the moment, there's a cap on everybody else except the multiple unions. So at the end of the day, we need to look at it that way. And I believe that if it's going to be a cap on one, it should be a cap on everyone. So absolutely defeats the whole purpose. But I'd also, as for funding candidates, yes, it sounds great, but there'd only be one of two ways that would happen to local government candidates, and that would either be a levy on our community or comes out of the pocket of the local government of the day, and we're already financially stressed. So I think our community would understand what I'm saying, and in an ideal world it would happen, but if there's a cap on one, there should be a cap on everyone, and that's why the furore that came out through the public. We've got a bit of a one-sided situation in the state at the moment, and it's very wrong in my view, and I wouldn't like that to be imposed on local government.
Thanks very much, Councillor Carroll. Any further questions? Councillor Von Hoff?
Just a comment, Mayor, in regard to the Toowoomba Sports Stadium, that you're saying that you've been informed of something from the Minister, and not knowing the details of what that is, if it's something that us as a council considers, or for the state government, we have to remember that that's a really sensitive area because it's in a residential neighbourhood. We've got to think about transport. There's a school right next door. So I look forward to all of the community consultation that will go into any announcement on that one.
Yep. I think many of us have sat around the table for a while that have been through two offers from the state government for us to take that oval over, and both those offers have been refused because of the enormity of the funding that we would be required. I think it's a very delicate one. There's no doubt the best thing we can do the best thing we can do is have a brand new stadium, hundreds of millions of dollars, but we're not going to get it. If we go fighting for that now, we'll get nothing out of the Olympics. And I would suggest to you that there will be some benefit as a result of Sterling Hinchcliffe's announcement. And I take on board exactly what you're saying. But have a look at Lang Park in Brisbane, have a look at the businesses and the houses and the difficulty parking and all that sort of thing. And I think for 20 or 30 years we might have to put up with a Lang Park style Berghofer Stadium, Athletic Oval. But hopefully there'll be some vision in the future and we will get a stadium that we deserve down the track. But I'm fearful that if we start talking about, no, we won't have it, we don't want it, we want a stadium, the Olympics won't come our way. Those 5 games of football may not come our way. 5 or whatever it is, yeah. So, sorry? Yeah,
but
it's...
it should be, in my view, should be at Charlton.
Yep, and I think it's about politics, because can I tell you, of all those people who sat around the table and working to get the Olympics, who were my friends as we worked to get it, now they're sitting there waiting to pick anything they can possibly get up out of the Olympics. And if we were to fail in this particular area, there are opportunities in the eastern seaboard to have those events down there. Councillor Carroll?
Mr Mayor, just confirming, I see in there that the Gold Coast, they weren't in the initial thing with ComSec, then they joined, now they're out again. Is
They're
that
out
the
again,
case?
yeah. They're doing their own thing in respect to the Olympics, yeah.
Well, they've got all the facilities from the Commonwealth Games, haven't they?
They have.
So they don't actually need to.
But I'm hoping that there will be a spread up and down the coast. We can understand that in the greater population areas with the better facilities, there's a more opportunity. But I'm delighted that some of the things that can happen here, and particularly pre the Olympic Games, I think we've got a good chance there. Any further questions? Not someone like to move the receipt of that report? Councillor McDonald, seconded please, Councillor Carol Taylor. Those in favour? Thank you very much. We move then to item 13, which shouldn't be too heavily involving, shouldn't delay us for too long. It's the rescheduling of the ordinary meeting of Council in June 2022. The recommendation is that the ordinary meeting of Council scheduled for June 21, June 2022, now be held on June 23rd, 2022.
Happy to move.
Happy to move it. Seconder, please. Councillor Von Hoff. Any comments? Those in favour? That's carried. Councillors, we move now to a matter that I have brought forward as a result of considerable lobbying and considerable thought. The motion that I will put to you that I'm happy to move is that Council approve a grant to the Royal Agricultural Society of Queensland in the amount of $86,580 to support the completion of the Toowoomba Equine Centre of Excellence Development Plan, with a grant to be funded from the current under expenditure in Council's 2021-22 operating budget and administered in accordance with Council's Sport and Recreation Grant Program guidelines. Before we go into debate, is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor McDonald has seconded that. Anyone wishing to speak against the motion? Sorry? Melissa?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Sorry, I tried to get in before you started, so I'm not speaking for or against. My apologies for not doing this earlier, but I inadvertently overlooked it. I need to declare a personal relationship with the President of the RASQ, but I request that I remain in the room and vote, as I don't have anything more to gain or to lose in regards to the matter brought forward.
Councillor Melissa Taylor has indicated that has a friendship with the President of the Show Society. Anyone in this room see a reason why not? Why she can't? Why she ought to leave?
Can I just ask a question?
Yep.
Mr Mayor, through you. Thanks, Councillor Melissa. Do you think that your relationship with the President would inhibit your decision-making process in this item?
Thanks for the question. No, I don't.
Therefore, Mr Mayor, I'm quite happy to move that Councillor Melissa stay in the room, be allowed to vote. given that her connection by way of friend and the way that she will have nothing more to gain or lose as a result of this motion.
Okay, Councillor McDonald has moved that Councillor Melissa Taylor remain in the room. Have I a seconder for that? Councillor Megan O'Hara-Sullivan. Those in favour? It's carried without dissent. We move back to the motion. Anyone wishing to speak on the motion? Councillor John.
Could I just raise a matter similar to Councillor Taylor in relation to association with the Show Society? I have raised it in the past here, but I'm also a friend of the President. In fact, he was a former article clerk of mine years ago, probably 30 years ago, so it's a bit ancient. My membership of the Show Society involved being on the committee and on the executive, but that ceased upon my election to council. I haven't had any association with the Show Society other than attending the show. Had no discussions in relation to any relevant matter, and in particular I've had no knowledge or involvement in this matter before council at all. In fact, the Olympics weren't even decided to come to Queensland, let alone Toowoomba's possible involvement in it at the time that I served on the Show Society. So I would intend to remain in the room during this discussion.
In respect to Councillor Shine's presence, is anyone wishing to make any comment? Move a motion. Councillor Carl?
Yeah, through you, Chair. Councillor Kerry, do you think that because you've stated you've been on the executive, that isn't a perceived conflict of interest, at least? I just draw reference to other declarations that have been made by councillors, and probably including myself, around involvement with other organisations, and particularly if you're on the executive, how you might be perceived to be conflicted. And given your recent, what I would call recent involvement at the beginning of this, ceased at the beginning of this term.
Do I see any conflict of interest as a result of that
Yeah, more the question is, how do you feel about a member of the public's perception on that, given your recent involvement and given your level of involvement on as an executive?
Yeah. Oh, well, how members of the public see it is up to members of the public, but I certainly, as I've indicated, don't see any conflict of interest on the basis that my involvement has been in the past, over 2 years ago, and certainly had no involvement in relation to the matter before us at the moment.
Anyone wishing to put forward a suggestion in respect to Councillor Shine's presence in the room? I'm quite happy to move that he remain. I don't think your association with the Show Society continues, Councillor Shine. And I personally can't see where you have something to gain, so I'm comfortable to move that. Councillor McDonald has seconded that. Anyone wishing to speak in regard to it? Those in favour of Councillor Shine remaining in the room? Those against? Councillor Carl, you wish to have your vote recorded? Okay, anyone else with a conflict of potential conflict? Councillor McDonald.
Just by way of process, I believe I should declare a conflict of interest simply because I'm a member of the Show Society and participate by way of a volunteer at the show, and have done for close to 30 years now. But I have never been on the executive of the show, and my substantive role is assisting at one of the many activities that happen at the showgrounds for those 2 or 3 days. Sponsor, true, yeah. Our company Cracker Print and Paper has been a sponsor of the showgrounds for that period of time, for 20 years at least. But I don't have any day-to-day operations for that in regard to that, so I couldn't tell you even if there was a figure. In fact, I think CEO, I had a letter from the CEO of the showgrounds in regard to that. Must have been 2 years ago, I think. So, yeah.
Any comments around the room, Councillor? Sorry, I can't quite.
I'm sorry, Mr Mayor, I forgot. And when we're finished with Councillor McDonald, I'll make a query as well. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone wishing to ask Councillor McDonald any questions in respect to his involvement? Someone like to move a motion of some sort in respect to his presence in the room while this matter's being discussed and during the vote?
Just clarification on that. I will have had a declaration on this matter before, and nothing has changed from that declaration.
Right.
So,
Brian, does that mean that it's been noted and it has been dealt with?
Yes, I think you're right.
I do recall that there was a previous declaration. We could refer to a previous declaration. We just have to find that on the previous minutes. As long as none of the circumstances have changed, then you could still rely on that one.
So do we need to move a motion along those lines, or is that adequate that that be noted?
I think we can just note that there's a previous declaration raised by the councillor and that none of the relevant circumstances have changed.
Okay. Kirsten, would you note that, please, that Councillor McDonald has declared this in the past, no circumstances have changed. And Councillor Summerfield.
Thank you. So I'm just reading definitions about all this. It's very hard for us as councillors to judge this because it's not about, we ask the question of the person, do you think that this, that you could be swayed one way or another? But in actual fact, it says, remember, the test is not whether the councillor is an honest and impartial person, but whether a reasonable and fair-minded person in the community could lose trust that the decision was made in their best interests. So I think we need to consider that or remember that when we're making all these decisions, because, there was hesitation with the previous one with Councillor Kerry and now with this. And so we just need to think about that bit, I think, whether a reasonable and fair-minded person in the community could lose trust that the decision was made in their best interests.
Thank you. Any comments in respect to that? Councillor Carol Taylor,
Thank you,
had
Mr Mayor. I don't
comment.
believe I have a conflict, but I just need to mention that I too have been a member since 1998 of the RASQ, and I've been a patron for 2 national inter-school equestrian competitions. Each competition is its own event, and each one comes up, but I don't believe I have any conflict of interest, but I just wanted that noted. Thank you.
Okay.
Unless council has any...
And can I seek advice from you, Brian? Is it adequate that that be noted?
I don't even think you have to note it. There's just no conflict as a member.
Okay, councillors, and no other declarations of any sort? Well, in moving this, can I just suggest to you that I think the development of a Toowoomba Equine Centre of Excellence will mean a lot long-term for this community. And it is not just about the games. We will benefit greatly when it comes to the games. And this is a grant that will find out just what needs to be done for the future of equestrian here. And I think it's already been said today that the horse industry is big here. Equestrian is big. And the number of equine vets we have, I think we've unquestionably got a centre of excellence for that will grow, and the potential there is for this to go on well into the future. And I'm told that when it comes to an event in Toowoomba, an equestrian event that comes here for a weekend or 1 or 2 days or something like that, the economic benefit for each event is in the order of $250,000 each weekend. Now, if you play that out over a year, if you play that out over 20, 30, 40, 50 years, that this will have a benefit for this community. The very reason I brought this here is about all of that. It's not just about the Olympics, it's about tremendous benefit to this community long term. Is there anyone who wishes to speak against the motion? Sorry? A question?
Thanks, Chair. Before we move into debate, I wouldn't mind clarifying a few things, if we could. So it's for an equestrian centre of excellence here, and I think that's noble. And it is written in the paragraph in the explanation of this motion, which is on screen, as an ideal prospect to host the 2032 Olympics here. We know that there's media quite widely circulated with equestrian events already gazetted to be held in Brisbane. We know that other councils, our direct neighbours in fact, are already aiming for the equestrian events. I'm just wondering, perhaps your knowledge in ComSec might be important here. Is that deal signed for Brisbane? And are we wasting our time, or is the media telling us a partial truth, or where do we stand on that?
The sporting entity that will be running the event at the Olympic Games will make that decision probably 3 years out from the Games. Yes, it's been highly promoted that Brisbane, Victoria Park, I think, is it, that where they're going to completely upgrade that to have it close there, but they don't have the breadth of facilities that we're likely to have here. This is not about necessarily definitely having the Olympic event here. This is about a centre of excellence that will be available from when it's built for the next 50 years to attract people to Toowoomba, and the possibility is in there that of teams training here, of teams working here, and of potentially a remote possibility that the event could be here. But the sporting body who will be determining that will be the World Equestrian Group, is my understanding, and they will make that determination a few years before the Games.
Well, might as well have our hat in the ring, I suppose. Bigger question, Chair. There's a fair bit of money attached to this, and it's for a study. Now, I'm very aware that local government things take time and they cost a lot, but must be a heck of a study for the amount we're spending on it. Can I have some clarification on that, to your knowledge?
In terms of, look, it may be best if Mark Freeman, who's up the back, came down. He may be able to answer some of those questions better than I can. Mark, of course, looks after the books and voluntarily at the Royal Agricultural Society. So, Mark, would you like to answer that question? You may have to press a little button at the bottom of the... It's right to go?
Right to go. Thank you, Mr Mayor and councillors. The study is more than just a study about the facilities itself that will be required to upgrade the showgrounds to be a centre of excellence. It's actually a business case around that. So it's quite significant in terms of the amount of work required to do that. And the company that have been approached to do this work is a group called CPR, and they've done this work for a number of different councils and also other business areas over a number of years, and they have a lot of experience, and I believe the quote they provided is quite reasonable given the scope of work that's required to do this work. I think, no, I don't know whether this was passed on, but this was definitely provided to council with our grant application. Did that get passed on to councillors? Okay, so the actual scope of works is there, so I don't know if you've had a chance to review that, but it is quite significant. There's a lot of expertise required, and unfortunately that expertise comes at a cost, and the cost is significant.
Happy with that?
Thank you.
Mayor, through you. Hi, Mark. So, with Brisbane City Council doing the work at Victoria Park for the cross-country, and forgive me if it's in here, will the study that we undertake be focusing on, is there sort of an admission from us that Brisbane City Council probably has that event, but there are others that we could be competitive for. Is that the intent?
As the Mayor said before, the decision won't be made until probably 3 or 4 years out from the Olympics. So I guess, as Councillor McMahon said before, throwing the hat in the ring is actually quite important. We're looking to provide an opportunity to create a venue that can be used by all sorts of equestrian groups from around Australia. And the Show Society currently has approximately 50 events per annum already. And some of those have been the inter-school events, both state-based and also national. And we've been contacted by both groups. They'd be very keen to see their event hosted by Toowoomba more than once every 10 years, very often, to be honest. Yes, we do. So it's actually it's the number of events that we can run now across every year going off into the future that we're looking at. It's not just the Olympics, but by creating a venue that could host the Olympics, it means our hat is well and truly in the ring. And there are real challenges with Victoria Park and also the RNA. They will not be legacy venues. They will be created for the event itself, and that's about it. It wouldn't be a wise thing to have a horse venue in the middle of Brisbane for obvious reasons. You wouldn't want people transporting horses there every weekend. It'd be very dangerous to do so. So it's not actually been created for a long-term use. It really is for the Olympics only. So I think there's a great opportunity for us. We already are an equestrian hub, and I think we're already seen as a place to do equestrian events. Our challenge is at the showgrounds, the venue is 35, 40 years old. It's very tired. It needs a significant upgrade to host these sorts of events. And even though Equestrian Queensland and Equestrian Australia have agreed to support the inter-school events being in Toowoomba, they do know that it's a challenge because the venue itself is, it does need upgrading.
No, thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Mark, for attending today. Just two questions. First of all, just a small one. I noticed that CPR have successfully carried out a project for the Gympie Regional Council, which resulted in over $1 million support from the Queensland Government for an equestrian centre. I take it that that's not a centre that would be in competition with us at all?
No, we actually have strong support from Equestrian Queensland that our venue is their preferred choice for an equestrian centre of excellence. So they have provided funding initially for a concept plan that we developed prior to this work being done, and they're fully behind our efforts to try and get a business case together and actually get cracking on developing the Equestrian Centre of Excellence at the Toowoomba Showgrounds.
Okay. Bearing in mind the financials that you also supplied to us, which we've all seen, if this goes ahead, this is the plan to be developed by CPR, including a business case, that's the perhaps the second part of the process. But the big part of it, of course, is building whatever has to be done as a result of that business case and management plan. Any idea of what figure might be considered as to what figure they might come up with? Bearing in mind allowing a range, a wide range, and secondly, of course, where funds would be sought to cover that cost?
It's a bit like asking how long's a piece of string, I'm afraid. We don't really have a dollar figure that I could throw out and say it could be somewhere around this amount. It really does depend on the number of venues that need upgrading, replacing, and potentially new venues created. So I probably can't answer that question, I'm sorry. I wouldn't want to guess, and I don't have the information in hand. In terms of sourcing funding, our plan is to approach both federal and state governments to assist us in that regard. So we have actually currently got an application in with the federal government to try and upgrade the Founders Pavilion. As many of you would know, that is considered the local evacuation centre for our region, and we are seeking funding to try and upgrade that to help it actually be what it should be.
Thanks very much. I've got Councillor Carol Taylor, then Councillor Nancy Sommerfield.
Thank you,
Councillor
Mr Mayor.
Carroll.
I just wanted to mention that whether we're accepted for the Games or whether we're not, there's still a lot to be gained by having the facilities here. I believe Toowoomba, I've always believed Toowoomba, if it got anything, should get the equestrian side of the Games. There's many reasons for that. In Brisbane, you would have something, you would have your show jumping and your dressage over at the RNA, which is inadequate with its stabling and other things, and you would have to have the cross country in a special course that they're planning or said they're going to build in Victoria Park. Here, we'll have it all in the one venue. And as well as that, you need to think about the stabling here, the veterinary services, experienced volunteers, access to feed supplies, farriers, horse vehicles and everything else, as well as adequate accommodation. So we've got an enormous amount going for us, and even if we weren't to get the actual competition event itself, there's every chance, if we've got really good facilities, that we're going to have some teams based here to actually in the lead up to the Games. But I think we should aim for the top, and I think we've got every chance. Nothing has been awarded yet, regardless of Brisbane and other places coming in and stating things. Nothing has been awarded yet, as you've said, Mr Mayor. And I think that, so what if we didn't? This is an equine centre. These facilities, upgraded facilities, exactly what the Olympic Games is looking for, leaving a legacy for events that are normally held here every year on an annual basis. I mean, apart from the COVID disruption that we've had, we hold out the showgrounds many equestrian events of many different kinds. And that surely is exactly what the Olympic Games Association is looking for. So I think we've got a great chance.
Thanks very much, Councillor Carroll. Councillor Nancy Sommerfield.
Thank you, Mayor Paul Antonio. I'm just wondering, in relation to this report, it's we're putting this forward because it was failed in the funding, the community funding rounds. So I'm worried that we're actually causing precedents here, that this will happen with other events that miss out during the funding rounds as well, by bringing this one forward. It does concern me a bit. And also, I just wondered how, when this is completed, how it's going to be funded. And I know that's been asked by Kerry, but we really don't know. We're going to give this money, but then we don't know how the plan's going to be funded to be delivered, and I just feel like that's lacking. I also wondered how much money council has already given the RASQ this financial year, because we assist them every year, and that's not in the report. And I would have thought that would have been an important note to have in the report, to understand how much council's already contributed to RASQ this financial year. So if anyone's got the answer to that they can give to us, so that we've got the information.
Nick Hauser, would you like to make a comment in respect to that? Because you're the area where the funding comes from, is my understanding, and when it comes to, maybe Anne-Marie might wish to make a comment as well in respect to quantum.
Councillors, Council supports the RASQ to the tune of about $20,000 or $25,000 to assist with a lot of in-kind stuff. Generally, we might assist with the provision of trade services or some mowing or cash to contribute to some of the operations. And this financial year, that's all that we've supported them with. Previously, you might remember, I think it was probably last financial year, we made a sponsorship to assist with the conduct of the show as a once-off, as a result of trying to help support through the times of COVID.
My understanding that was 150,000, was it?
That's correct, and that was in the previous financial year, but this year it's been to the value of the 25,000.
All right, and I know it was an on-the-spot question, Nick, so if you find that that's different, could you advise councillors via email after the event?
I'm quite confident. I'm looking at Mark and he's nodding, and given that he's the money man for the RASQ, he would be right across what's coming in. So, but if I do find it to be different, I'll let you know.
Okay, so do we advise them of what our in-kind costs are, that they know that, do we?
Yeah, if there's a request, and I haven't been involved in these in the last couple of years, but prior to that there might be a request for assistance with some mowing, or there might be some electrical work to do, and we'd send our trades and our mowing teams to do that, and we would cost the value of that work up to the $25,000. That's the arrangement that we had.
Okay, thank you. So having said that, and I am concerned about precedents here, I am very supportive of RASQ, which I'm sure most people are aware of, and I strongly agree with Councillor Carroll's views that we are an equine centre of excellence, the whole of our Toowoomba region. We have so much equine exposure and the economic stimulation that comes out of that. So I will be supporting this, but I'm just a little bit unsure about how we went about bringing it to council.
Maybe this is an opportunity where the CEO could make a comment in respect to the very things you're bringing forward, Councillor Nancy, about how we bring it to council, that sort of thing. If you'd like to make a comment, Brian, if there's a part of the process that you see a problem with. Councillor Carl and then Councillor O'Shea after that.
There's various ways you can come to council. Obviously, it can come from a mayoral minute, it can come from a notice of motion, so any council can put up a notice of motion, or you can ask for a report via your general manager. They're the normal processes that you can bring forward the information for council's consideration. And then if council's in any of those forums, if council needs further information, they don't have to make a decision at this point in time. They can defer that if they wish to, and consider it at some other time if necessary.
The point of the question is, are you comfortable with the process? Is there an issue at all with any of the process that you see?
No, there's no issue. They're all legitimate mechanisms about how you can bring information forward for council's consideration. Once it's in the hand of the council, and the majority of the councils can then determine how they wish to handle any particular issue that comes before them, and if they require further information before they make a decision, or they're happy to make it on the basis of the information before them, it's up to the councillors in the majority to make that decision.
Thanks, Brian. Councillor Bill, Carl?
Thanks, Chair. Just in the reasons for the motion, it's very brief, the explanation. I've poured my way through the extensive attachment and supporting documents, but I just want to be clear in my mind, and maybe through you, Nick, you might be the best person to answer this. The assessment panel recommending not to approve, my question is, did this previous application tick all the boxes, and it was just a case of there wasn't enough money in the funding round or pool? So they ticked all the boxes?
The short answer is yes, that's correct. The longer answer is that there was $126,000 available through the Sport and Rec Community Grants for the last round, and this application was for $86,000, which represented a significant portion of the available funds. And so the panel prioritised a number of other projects to spread that fund across more projects. This project was recommended, though, through the moderation assessment panel, which we conducted for the first time at this round 2, but again, there wasn't the large quantum of funds available for the distribution to support this. So it was assessed, it was thought to be a worthy project. It was just our capacity to fund that moved it down the priority list in terms of their recommendations.
Thanks, Nick.
Councillor O'Shea.
So thanks, Mayor. My question or point probably was just on that, because it is a good question how we arrived at this point in the situation of when it actually went through the grants. But I think Nick's probably adequately outlined that, and probably the only thing I would add to that, I suppose, was at the time when we were looking through it, was probably something that was assessed, I guess, by the panel, and I think Councillor McDonald and McMahon on this one as well. They might want to correct me or add anything to it, but I think it was around, it probably was bigger than something than just through our grants program. So it was the opportunity was with the Olympics and things that we're talking about here and along those lines, that it might be an opportunity that there was another method or another way of which council could assess it and look at it and see if they deemed it something worthy of funding. But as I said, I think Nick outlined a lot of things that definitely ticked all the boxes. Again, it was a large sum of money when we're looking at the actual grants that or the applications we had in at the time, and more so looking at perhaps this was something bigger than grants. It was more something through economic development or something like this. So I think that probably, but as I said, I think Nick probably adequately covered a few of the queries, but they're probably good points to raise.
Thank you. Anyone with any other comments? Anyone wishing to formally speak against the motion? Councillor McDonald, you have a
Thanks,
comment?
Mayor. No, I just had a question actually for Mark, if you wouldn't mind. Mark, the ongoing conversation around the showgrounds, given that it's situation of a state government-owned facility, is around the deed of trust in the Doggett. And by doing this or going down this path of the business case and what have you, is there or does there need to be some political intervention in parallel to look at that Doggett, or does this business case say you can do it without having to change?
You're probably aware we are actually continually speaking with the state government about changing that Doggett. We've even written to them, and we'll continue down that road. We would like to see it changed, but the business case for the Equestrian Centre of Excellence isn't impacted by the current land use agreement that we have in place, because it allows us to do sport events and the associated activities with those. What we would like to see happen is a change to allow us to have permanent or more permanent accommodation, because most equestrian events need significant accommodation attached to them. And so the way we're currently set up, we have to continually bring in temporary accommodation facilities, which is quite expensive and not very efficient. So we'd love to see that changed. But having said that, that doesn't stop us from continuing down this same road. We can continue with what we're doing.
Thanks, Mark. No, that's good. That clarifies it. Thank you.
Are there any other matters that people wish to, any questions? Councillor O'Hara-Sullivan.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. So, Mark, just to clarify, and that question of Councillor McDonald's is a good one about the Doggett.
Yep.
Do you know that it's permissible to have the not School of Excellence, the Equine Centre?
Yes, it is, because it falls within the sport category, okay. So it's absolutely fine. We're allowed to do it.
Okay.
But to be more efficient in making it all happen, it would be better if we had permanent accommodation on site.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, any other questions? If not, with your permission, councillors, I'll put this to the vote. There's no one wishing to speak against the motion. Those in favour of this grant? Thank you very much. That's carried unanimously, and I think that gives me an indication of our will to do something pretty special for this community. So thanks, Mark, for being here. I appreciate that. Councillors, there is an army exercise coming to town, and I understand there's a couple of people waiting outside for me to do a news conference. So with your permission, I will hand over to Councillor McDonald to conclude the meeting.
Thanks, Mayor. Appreciate that. Councillors, our next item of business is general business. Any other business council determines by resolution to be included in the agenda. Are there any matters to be raised? Anyone like to raise any general business? No matters to be raised. If that's the case, we now move to close the meeting to the public. Have someone move that we close the meeting? Moved by Councillor Carroll, seconded by Councillor Tim. Those in favour? Motion is carried. Need to vote on, make a decision. It's item number 17. Haven't we done that? Oh. Sorry about that, Kirsten. Moved by Councillor Carroll, seconded by Councillor Rebecca. Thank you. And everyone was in favour. All right, we're back on. Thank you, Brendan. Very good. Item number 17, councillors, is the one we need to vote on in open session, which is, and the motion there is before you, that council note the Chief Executive Officer's advice. Do I have a mover for that motion? Moved by Councillor Carroll, seconded by Councillor Megan. Those in favour? That motion is carried. That concludes the ordinary meeting for the month. Thank you, councillors, and of course it is National Volunteer Week, so we close with a big thank you to the volunteers. Thank you very much.